Okay, good afternoon everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Cabinet. If anyone's warm or wants to remove their jacket, please feel free. I already have. I've just come away from stomping around the top of Portsmouth Hill for a couple of hours and was about to collapse. So apologies for that, but please feel free to be as casual as necessary. It's very hot today. The couple of process bits before we get started. I'm Councillor Steve Pitt. I'm the Deputy Leader of the Council. The Council Leader has a healthcare appointment this afternoon and is therefore unable to attend and sends his apologies. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room. The public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lift. Please assemble at Queen Victoria's statue in front of the civic offices. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust fire marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at Guildhall reception desk should remember to sign out when leaving the building after today's meeting. We will be live web streaming today's meeting. I'll draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting will be live streamed from a camera which is at a fixed location at the back of the meeting room, and the recording will be on the Council's website. The camera will mainly operate and capture the backs of anyone making deputations. There will be some footage of them as they approach and leave the table where the microphones are located, and of people entering or leaving the room whilst the meeting is in progress. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that do not wish to be recorded. Please can everyone use the microphones provided when they are speaking, and to operate them you push the button to your right as you look at it. We'll go around the table and make introductions. So to my left,
Councillor Rob Wood, Cabinet Member for Children and Families.
Matthew Winton, Cabinet Member for Health, Wellbeing and Social Care.
Susie Horton, Cabinet Member for Education.
Darren Sanders, Cabinet Member for Housing.
Councillor Lee Hunt, Cabinet Member for Community Safety.
Councillor Lynn Stagg, Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation.
Dave Ashmore, Cabinet Member for Environment and Climate Change.
Hayley Trower, Air Quality Lead for Transport.
Tristan Samuels, Director of Regeneration.
Guy Mason, Regeneration.
Chris Ward, Director of Finance.
Richard Lee, Regulatory Services Manager.
Peter Wolf, City Solicitor.
Jerome Hall-Smith, Democratic Services.
Okay, welcome everyone. We've got a member of the press with us today. Would you like to say who you are, just so everyone from the public knows as well? Thank you, Neil. Welcome to you too. And we've got Paddy with us from the strategy unit out the back there as well. We do have one deputation we'll come to shortly. The other apology for absence we have is from Councillor Jeanette Smith, who's unable to be with us this afternoon. And I understand we do have one deputation request, and that's from Mike Dobson, who's also with us today. Colleagues, any declarations of interest? Darren.
More in the interest of openness and transparency, Steve, I am a member of two organisations that form part of the Let Pompey Breathe coalition.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, as am I.
Okay. Any more?
One organisation.
Just one of them. Any more?
Chair, the person, Mike, I know Mike Dobson for a long time, but I don't think that prejudices me.
Okay. No.
And the same as Darren and Matt, I'm a member of some organisations that are affiliated to Let Pompey Breathe.
Councillor Ashmore, you're looking like you need to say something.
Not really, but I have had interactions with Mr Dobson quite a few times, but I don't think that'll have any bearing on this meeting.
Last chance. Anyone else? Okay, right, I think we're good. In that case then, as you'll know, colleagues, there are two bits to the agenda today. There's a supplementary agenda and the main agenda item, which is the Air Quality Annual Statement Report. I'm proposing, if everyone's happy, that we take items 4 and 5 first and then proceed on to the main report afterwards. Is everyone happy with that? In that case, the first item is item 4, which is Southsea flood defences and the detailed design contract. Over to you, Guy.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is seeking approval from members for the appointment of the new designer leading into the detailed design stage of the Southsea Flood Defence Scheme. This is an important appointment, as it takes us through the detailed design, which in essence fine-tunes the project around the seafront master plan and also around costs as well. It's fully funded within the council-approved capital programme and is a fairly short and sharp programme in itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Guy. Any questions from anyone? No, in that case we have two recommendations before us. One for Cabinet members to approve the appointment of the new designer Haskoning DHV to continue to develop the project in the detailed design stages, and secondly that Haskoning are internationally recognised design consultants with expertise in the delivery of coastal flood defence schemes both in the UK and abroad. His work is already fully funded, as Guy has said, through the council approved capital programme, with £2 million provided by way of Portsmouth City Council contribution and a further £3.5 million of capital funding provided by the Environment Agency. Contract value is expected to outturn at circa 3.6 million. Is everyone happy with those two recommendations? Okay, that's approved then, Guy. Thank you very much, and there's no requirement for you to stay with us for the rest of the meeting if you choose not to.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the City of Sanctuary report. We've had a bit of further discussion around where we're at with this. Caroline, it might be helpful if you gave us a bit of background to where the current situation is, and then I'll make some further comments, if that's all right.
And good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to provide an introductory report to the City of Sanctuary agenda. Many of you would know this movement launched in the city very successfully last week with the backing of over 80 organisations, which is absolutely fantastic. City of Sanctuary as a movement started in Sheffield in 2005. Within Sheffield, it was heavily backed by the council and was able to achieve some fantastic actions in relation to community cohesion and supporting particularly asylum seekers and refugees to feel welcomed, safe and thrive within that city. It has been championed by the British Red Cross nationally, and locally the agenda has actually been broadened to encompass a wider group that includes veterans, the homeless and people who have been survivors of domestic abuse. So it's got broad reach, it's cross-cutting for us as a local authority, given the range of services we have. There's a large local appetite for it, and we have publicly announced our support for the agenda, and so our next steps are to think about, as a local authority, how we are looking at that ethos around learn, embed and share in terms of our practice.
Okay, thank you. A couple of things from me. Caroline, am I right in saying that there are various ways open to the council in how we would proceed with this? We could just voice our support and nothing else at this stage, but that the general feeling is that there are real opportunities here to make progress on this agenda across Portsmouth City Council. So the report takes us one step towards that, but that we need to do a bit of further work around identifying exactly how we resource that with budget and make sure that every portfolio is fed into that report in case there's any opportunities to expand further at this stage. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
And Chris, am I right in saying that that should be quite a short exercise around the identification of the funding stream?
I would have thought we could do that in the next few days.
Okay, so it's worth, I think, just postponing a little bit longer on this to flesh it out a tiny bit more and make sure we're 100% on the finance side of things, in the interest of openness and transparency, so that everybody knows exactly what's going on. So thank you for your work to date, Caroline. Colleagues, are you happy to defer this item and get it exactly where it needs to be? I think we're almost there, but not quite, and it's worth a very short delay just to make sure we've done it properly. Are everyone okay with that? Yeah. Okay, then thank you for your work so far, Caroline, and look forward to taking that at the next meeting. Thank you. So that now takes us back to the larger agenda pack, which is item 3. Do we take the deputation first or the officer's report first?
That's up to the Cabinet, but if you wish the deputation to hear the presentation first.
Mike, would you like to hear the officers, come and join us, and would you like to hear the officers' presentation first before giving your own deputation? Would you be comfortable with that, or would you rather do it the other way around? We don't mind.
although I don't expect I'll be taking any issue with the report, I'd very much like to hear what Richard Lee will say.
Excellent. In that case, over to you, Richard.
Good afternoon, members. This is a report, it's a statutory report that is required by DEFRA of central government, and it is a report in summary detailing the monitored data of Portsmouth City Council's monitoring of pollution in Portsmouth for the year 2018. That's a calendar year. DEFRA provide us with an opportunity of up to the 30th of June to publish this report. The report is comprehensive, consisting of about 160 pages. I make very little apology for the comprehensive nature of the report. It is a requirement of DEFRA that I follow their prescriptive template, so please forgive the detail. I'll be very happy to answer any questions that you may have about the content of the report itself, but the covering report details some other areas that are of interest to residents and businesses in Portsmouth about the quality of air in Portsmouth. So I'll run through the report as presented. The purpose of the report is threefold. It is a confirmation of our requirement to review and assess air quality and publish the annual status report. It sets out the legal responsibilities placed upon Portsmouth City Council in respect to the requirements of DEFRA. So those are the requirements not only to publish this report, but it does highlight the requirements of DEFRA in respect to ministerial directions which have been served upon Portsmouth City Council. And in summary only, it sets out the actions which have been undertaken and are proposed by Portsmouth City Council, which are likely to positively impact upon the levels of pollution in Portsmouth. The recommendation is that the Cabinet approves the publication to DEFRA of the annual status report, and it also in section 9.4 sets out some documents which I'm asking the Cabinet to formally approve publication of, which have been material to the creation of the annual status report. The reasons for the recommendations are very clear. I think it's well established that there are health implications in terms of pollution levels generally, and that nitrogen dioxide and particulate levels are a focus in terms of the impact upon public health. And of course the reason is of course to comply with our statutory obligations. It's worth highlighting section 3.3 that although we may approve the publication of the report today, DEFRA have the final say whether they agree with the content of the report. They will in due course do an appraisal of its content, and I will of course bring that appraisal to you if it's negative in its narrative. A summary of the actions are set out in section 4, the actions that we proposed for 2019 and 2020. And the key area, they were of course to deliver reductions in pollution, to achieve compliance with the statutory obligations under the local air quality management regime, to publish the report by the 30th of June, to comply with the ministerial directions that have been imposed by DEFRA upon Portsmouth City Council, and to deliver a new comprehensive plan to tackle air pollution. And we have to publish that comprehensive plan by the 31st of October 2019. Section 5 is a further reiteration of the need for action in terms of the public health significance and the cost to the NHS. In terms of local air quality management, I provided a little information in section 6, which talks about relevant exposure and compliance with the national air quality objectives. And we have a responsibility where exposure, relevant exposure, exceeds the objectives. We have an obligation to declare air quality management areas. Portsmouth City Council have long established a regime of declaration of air quality management areas. We currently have 5 declared air quality management areas. Originally we had 13, and of course we revoked the remainder some years ago. A reiteration in section 6 also about my use of the DEFRA template. I have used a little bit of license in terms of that template to apply additional value in terms of the information within the report, And I hope that that has been useful to members in considering the seriousness of the issue in front of you today. Section 7 details the change of approach. We have for a long time been monitoring air quality, particularly nitrogen dioxide and particulate matter, for many years, over a decade. And that the previous regime, or the current regime, has required us to monitor levels of pollution where there is relevant exposure. Relevant exposure has a definition, and it is where there are buildings such as homes, hospitals and schools. So that means where people effectively don't have a choice to be exposed to pollution. However, the government have taken a slight change as a result of challenges that have been placed upon central government from agencies such as Client Earth to comply with the EU directives. And they have asked us to monitor new areas of Portsmouth where there is exposure to higher levels of pollution. And exposure is defined where effectively a member of the public may find themselves exposed to pollution levels, and that would include areas such as pavements. So anywhere where a member of the public could be exposed to pollution. And that is detailed within section 7. So we have increased our level of monitoring quite significantly over the past year. Some of that monitoring as a result of this new regime is of relatively short duration. So we have a decade of data with regard to a number of locations, approximately 25, where we have long-term data spanning a large number of years. And in all the graphs at the back of the ASR, the last 5 years of data has been provided for you with a very detailed assessment of the trend line in relation to that data and the relationship between the 2017 data and the 2018 data. It is not possible for me to give you an indication of trend lines over a long term with regard to the new requirement to monitor situations under the regime of exposure rather than relevant exposure to pollution. I have very short-term data, and what I have done within the report is published all that data where I have at least 3 months data. Where I have 3 months data, DEFRA's technical guidance allows me to predict an annual average for that data. Obviously, I can't do that if I only have a month or two worth of data. So the data is key, of course, with regard to where we are in terms of air quality. But I think it's fair to say that in terms of the long-term data, there is no significant deterioration in air quality in Portsmouth. However, the new focus in areas of exposure means that we do have areas where we hadn't monitored before, and we know now that there are high levels of pollution in other areas of the city, and that is detailed within the ASR itself. DEFRA have been very clear that they require us to do more, and they've done that through a number of ministerial directions, and these are detailed within Section 8. And DEFRA have required us to produce a new plan to resolve all our air quality problems in Portsmouth, not only where we have long-term data, but also where we have short-term data in the areas where the public are likely to be exposed to pollution. And they are very clear what they are asking us to do, or requiring us to do, through the ministerial directions. And that is to benchmark all our actions to resolve air quality problems, so bring them in line with the EU directive, and benchmark them against a clean air zone. That is an absolute must, and we are currently working on that with our colleagues in transport to benchmark our actions to improve air quality against a clean air zone. It is also important to note that our actions to improve air quality must achieve compliance in the same time or shorter time that a clean air zone could be implemented and proven to be effective in terms of reducing the level of pollution within the city to assure compliance with the objectives. It's worth reiterating that the pollutant we are most interested in is nitrogen dioxide, and that is the only pollutant that we have exceedances of the objective. In terms of PM10 and PM2.5, they are a significant concern, but our monitoring data demonstrates we have no exceedances of PM10 or PM2.5 currently. So the ministerial directions have been served upon us. We are not the only local authority to have these served upon us. There are a number of first and second wave local authorities, and there are 33 third wave authorities, of which we are one. And the government is prescriptively requiring us to follow their guidelines and requirements of how to develop a plan to solve the nitrogen dioxide problems we have in Portsmouth. And they are absolutely clear that we must engage with them regularly to ensure that we are doing just that. We are following their guidelines, we are seeking their advice, and we are producing a plan to meet their prescriptive requirements. The plan itself is detailed in section 9. It is very clear that the government are requiring us to do this. This is not a choice that Portsmouth City Council has. We have to do it in accordance with their requirements, but as I reiterate, we have to do it and benchmark it against a CAZ. There are a number of different types of CAZs. I won't go into that detail, but I can answer a question, or Hayley can, if you have them. But we have an obligation to present our plan to DEFRA by the 31st of October 2019. In terms of the information that I'm requesting you to publish, we've already done an awful lot of work to reach this stage in regard to our plan, and some of the documents which have formed part of this report and are mentioned within the ASR are already on the PCC website on air quality. So I'm asking for your consent, but effectively, as I knew that this document was going to be published through the democratic process, they are already available on the PCC website. So in conclusion, this is an important report, but it's not the most important action that Portsmouth City Council has to consider this year. The key conclusions of the 2019 ASR are that nitrogen dioxide levels in Portsmouth are a significant concern, that delivering compliance with the statutory obligations and further reducing harmful effects of pollution is a key priority, and compliance may require the deployment of a CAZ of some description. That despite having information in respect to pollution levels not previously assessed, that the historical information determines that we do not have a significant deterioration of air quality in Portsmouth. However, PCC will continue to expand its knowledge of nitrogen dioxide levels, continue its deployment of the monitoring devices that we have, and where necessary further expand those monitoring devices. And of course that PCC commits to working with DEFRA and all other interested parties, including the Air Quality Steering Group, to assess the complex needs of Portsmouth with regard to reducing nitrogen dioxide levels in compliance with the EU National Air Quality Directives. I did provide a summary of the results on a single page, which is set out in Table 1 in 10.2. I won't run through that unless you have any questions later. And 10.3 is a reiteration that PM10 and PM2.5 are not in exceedance of the National Air Quality Objectives. It's worth noting a point in Section 12 that we know that Brexit is now back on the agenda, that this issue will run irrespective of where we find ourselves on the same date that we publish our new plan in regard to leaving or staying within the EU. So the recommendation is to approve the publication of the annual status report, and apologies, the publication of the additional documentation which is already available. If you have any questions, I'll be very happy to assist.
Point of clarification, because I want to take Mike's deputation next.
Yeah, it's just a quick, just so I understand, Appendix E, where you give the clarification PM10, PM2.5, and you said we're concentrating on nitrogen oxide. There's also SO2, sulfur dioxide. So are you excluding that? Just so I understand, because you explicitly said PM10 and PM2.5 are out, and then you explicitly said nitrogen dioxide, but you didn't mention the other.
So nitrogen dioxide is proven to be an exceedance of the national air quality objectives. We monitor that at around about 120 locations around the city, all of which are documented within the ASR. We monitor PM10 at a limited number of locations through continuous monitoring devices. They're more sophisticated than our nitrogen dioxide monitoring devices. In terms of the other pollutants, which are established under the Environment Act 1995, we have been monitoring pollution in Portsmouth since 1995. What we've been able to do through those monitoring regimes is prove that we're in compliance with the other pollutants which are listed within that Act.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Before we do an we need to take the deputy. Oh, okay. Lynn, can you use your mic, please? Thanks.
Sorry, section 4, page 4, third bullet point, publish the 2019 ASR by the 30th of June 2018. I think it should be 19. I know it's pedantic, but
You're right, that'll be changed.
Okay, without further ado, over to Mr. Dobson for your deputation. You'll have 6 minutes, but we'll give you a little bit of latitude on that, but not too much.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt. Councillors, everyone, good afternoon. I'm Mike Dobson, and I'm speaking on behalf of many clean air campaigners in Portsmouth. I'd also like to say that we recognise the hard work of PCC councillors and officers to cope with the additional workload necessitated by the requirements imposed by central government. However, there are a few issues that could jeopardise this hard work, and I'd like to bring those to your attention. There seems to be some disconnects between different parts of the council that might weaken the effectiveness of the air quality measures underway. I'd also like to reassure the Cabinet about the potential for a clean air zone to redress the environmental injustices created by air pollution. The disconnects. The first place for people to read about Portsmouth's vision for delivering clean air is the air quality strategy. This is a copy that's on the council website, and when I go to this, the Cabinet, it is endorsed by the Cabinet Member for Traffic, Councillor Simon Bosher, and the Cabinet Member for the Environment, Councillor Robert New. Now, I know that the office holders have changed, but I don't think the public will. The strategy is a rather lukewarm pledge. We will strive to consistently work towards achieving all statutory local air quality standards by 2027. My understanding is that DEFRA requires the Council not only to strive towards achieving, but striving is not enough. Portsmouth has to achieve statutory air quality standards in the shortest possible time, which is far shorter than 2027. The next issue is about traffic growth assumptions. The context was set by the former head of planning, who briefed the Traffic Environment and Community Safety Panel in November 16 that traffic was expected to increase in the city by 41% in 10 years. Despite that, Portsmouth air quality policies are informed by the source apportionment study 2017 that formed part of the annual status report. That study uses a national traffic model to predict that traffic will increase in Portsmouth over 5 years by 2%. That's 0.4% per annum, only 1/10 of the amount predicted by planning. The targeted feasibility study prepared last August contains several measures to reduce our dependence on private motor traffic and reduce air pollution, such as a new travel to work scheme that is expected to reduce rush hour private car usage by 20%, better public transport and support for buses with the retrofit programme, and better active travel with improved walking and cycling routes. However, the Portsmouth local plan and the forthcoming air quality local plan are using a different model. This is the Solent sub-regional traffic model. This model makes very different predictions. Despite making mention of the expanded bus rapid transit system, tables 18 to 21 give the detail where the model predicts that by 2031, car use in Portsmouth will increase by 13.5%. That's double the amount predicted by the air quality studies. It also predicts that public transport will reduce by 8.4%. The modal shares are that private car use will increase from 50 to 53%, and public transport and active travel will decrease. And there's a similar pattern for journeys between Portsmouth and the rest of Hampshire. Now, I don't think that's what the Cabinet wants. The cause of this seems to be that the Solent Regional Traffic Model does not contain any environmental model, and there seems to be no link from Portsmouth's air quality strategy into the assumptions used by the model. Rather, the model seems to work on the outdated assumption that more development requires more cars, and so more road capacity has to be provided to accommodate the demand. This is an unsustainable strategy. If one built a new road, then people will want to use it. This is what the traffic planners call induced demand. Now, this model was used by WSP for the city centre road, and I'm concerned, and the environmental statement for the city centre road did admit deep down in the detail that it would make air pollution worse in some parts of the city, especially commercial road pedestrian precinct. I'm concerned that maybe this model is being used for the city centre link, and it seems there's a fundamental incompatibility. If the lower traffic growth used for air quality studies is valid, then one has to ask, is there a need for a city centre link? And if the higher growth factor is used is valid, then it's likely to undermine all the good air quality work. I've made this point many times over the last 18 months, and I won't mention names, but the ducking and diving to avoid giving a straightforward answer to a simple question would impress Boris Johnson. Please, would the Cabinet commit to resolving this issue? So we've got one figure for planning, transport, public health and air quality. Finally, there's been some coverage in the news about the possibility of a clean air zone being introduced and fears for the poorest of the city. Now, I've provided for councillors a PowerPoint handout which has got the graphs and the words on it. But I'll summarise by saying that March this year, Public Health England produced a report, and the Director of Health Protection said, "A key challenge is the commonly held view that actions to reduce air pollution run counter to economic growth and development. In my view, the evidence presented in this report highlights that this is not the case. This is surely an opportunity for better air quality and economic prosperity to go hand in hand." Similarly, from academia, the University of West of England has just published a paper in Transportation Research, which is confirming that areas with the highest proportion of young people and the poorest households have the highest concentrations of traffic-related pollution. Households in the poorest areas emit the least pollution. I'm heartened that nationally the Liberal Democrats have recognised this with far-sighted policies to reduce air pollution. Specifically in Portsmouth, Charles Dickens Ward is the poorest. 63% of households have no access to a car or van. People who can't afford a car aren't in a position to upgrade to a compliant vehicle. Instead, they have to walk, cycle or stand by the roadside in the polluted air to wait for a bus.
Mike, just to let you know, you are quite a bit over the 6 minutes, so if you could start summing up, that would be great.
I will do, and I appreciate the grant. To conclude, the Council is doing much good work to improve air quality, but I really am worried that this good work will be undermined if these inconsistencies are not resolved. And I think that that if a clean air zone is imposed, that we should recognise the value of reducing the inequalities and welcome the advantage to be bold in mitigating the short-term challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and you're welcome to stay there if you want to listen to the rest of the debate rather than being in the seats at the back. Colleagues, questions, Lee.
Right, a couple of procedural things. Who's going to take responsibility for updating the website that the Clean Air Strategy? That's the pictures of and update all of that. because Tristan's gone. I don't know where he's gone.
Okay, so what I was going to do was ask Joe if you could give a summary of the deputation comments around
Indeed.
that. Are you able to do that from what we've got today from your notes? No, not now.
So what we're after,
So if a summary of that goes to Councillor Ashmore and he can discuss it with officers in environment climate change to make sure we take action.
Indeed, and this and also the points that Mr Dobson raised about the differences in the statistics between the various three documents I think you mentioned that you've never had a reply to.
It's the two documents, source apportionment study and then the Solent sub-regional traffic model.
To understand the differences between those, Joe, so somebody needs to answer that. It's apparently been answering for a long time. It's a shame Tristan's gone. I wanted to ask him about something to do with planning and this, so I can't do that now.
Okay, anyone else? Councillor Ashmore.
No, I was just going to say thanks for the to Richard for the report, as ever comprehensive, full of things. We've been reading through it. It's absolutely got everything in it. It's very in depth. And I also want to thank Mrs Dobson for coming along and talking to us, as you do when it's a decision meeting. Usually my decision meeting or whoever holds the cabinet position, you come along to do it like that. And with the air quality being in the news and with the emphasis on it and with the ministerial directive, I think you deserve some credit for keep coming along, and as do Let Pompey Breathe and any clean air campaigns. They deserve some credit, and that's why it's come to a cabinet, so we can all have a discussion about it this time. We can all see what's in the report rather than it being at just one person's cabinet member's thing. But you make some very, very good points there, especially about things like people in the how can I put it, in the lower income wards, for want of a better word, having the lowest levels of car ownership, but they're the ones that are most affected by it. I think that's something that we should all take on board when we're looking at this. It's, because people who live in poor areas of the city can live, I think it's something like 10 years less than people who live in, for want of a better word, wealthier parts of the city. And that's something that is shameful. So hopefully the things that we're doing to address the air quality on this will help the health, will help the well-being of everyone, and it won't come down to what income bracket you fit into, to whether you can actually live healthily. So thank you for the report, Richard, and thank you very much for coming and speaking to us and highlighting the issues that you have.
Thank you, Dave. Darren?
Thank you, Steve. I have to say several of the points that Mike raised in his deputation are things that, for us living in Milton and Baffins and Copnor, we've been banging on about for years, to be honest. The fact is our roads are too clogged and our air is too dirty. And that has a major impact in terms of jobs, it has a major impact in terms of kids, it has a major impact in terms of life expectancy. And if Gerald were here, Dave, he would say it's 10 years is the gap between living in Charles Dickens and living in Drayton and Farlington. And those are the things we've got to address. I think Mike has been right to raise the fact that it's almost like the air quality strategy is from another age. And it's been overtaken by events, it's been overtaken by the changes in assessment criteria that Mr Lee has outlined, which I have to say has vindicated all the stuff that we in Milton have been banging on about for years. And I'm delighted that Richard and the rest of the team are taking some steps in order to do this. Just a few observations. If we are to achieve this, we effectively have to do in 18 months what it took London 3.5 years to do, with less power and less money. And that is why it's important that the £400 million that Councillor Ashmore and Councillor Stagg and officers have been looking to get out of government, it happens. Because if it doesn't, we will lose control. And we need control. And we need to be in control of the situation, because there are people in our city who think that, including in the very poor areas, Mike, who think the diametric opposite of you. They think that it will hit their jobs. They think that it will hit their homes. It will hit their money. We have 23% of people on housing benefit in the city who work. And that says to me that we've got a slightly different economy, and our definitions of poverty may be different. So we have to make sure we can do all that. It also means that we have to take control of the number of homes we build rather than have artificial housing targets imposed on us. So, Richard, I'm delighted that this report is as comprehensive as it is, because it's got to be. Because we've got to tell people the truth. And the truth is our air is too dirty, our roads are too clogged. We have to take significant and radical measures to deal with that, because if we don't, then it won't be us who will suffer, it'll be our kids and it'll be our grandkids, and that is not acceptable. So we're happy to back it, Steve.
Thank you, Darren. Councillor Winnington.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for the report. It's, again, echoing Darren's comments about how comprehensive it is. It has to be, and it really gives us a point of view of where we are in the city and the problem we find ourselves in. And thank you to Mike, of course, who I know very well, and certainly on the side of air pollution, there's not a meeting of the executive cycle forum that goes by where Mike doesn't bring that up, and quite right too. And that is something where it is absolutely intrinsic to the way we deal with air pollution, not on its own, but obviously as part of a much greater whole in terms of reducing the amount of cars on the roads and encouraging people to walk, cycle and use sustainable transport. But for me, the really key thing about air pollution, and this is why it's so important not to just take this report as just on its own and think, well, we'll do this and we'll take action and hopefully we'll improve air quality, whether it's with a clean air zone as it's most likely to be, or without, or whatever it might be. But this is just the start of a journey, because actually what we want in the city is there to be as little air pollution as possible, if not no air pollution as possible, which obviously if we became a city that had that aspiration, I think we should grab it, because the alternative is extremely serious. So we've heard about life expectancy could be reduced by air pollution. I'm asthmatic myself. I have no idea. I cycle up every day for my day job up the most polluted corridor in this city, and I have no idea fundamentally what difference that has on my health, because I manage my asthma well and I have done since I was 4. But then again, I don't know what I would be like, how much better I would be if I didn't have to do that journey every day. Because the fundamental situation here is that this may be directly causing people's deaths. So there's the situation in London where there's a inquest has now been quashed from 2014 of a 9-year-old girl who died in February 2013 because there is now potential evidence that her death could be directly as a cause of air pollution. We have a leading expert in asthma and air pollution from Southampton University said there's a striking association between the girls' emergency hospital admissions and recorded spikes in nitrogen dioxide and PM10s. If this comes up in the new inquest later this year, that there is a direct causal link, then we really do have to take the conclusion that not only is air pollution dangerous to people, it is literally a killer. And when that comes out, as it is very possible it could come out that it's saying that, it will be the first causal link between air pollution and people's deaths, not just people's deaths, child's death in this country, and I believe one of the first in the world. So this isn't a game, this isn't something we can take lightly. We have to take this extremely seriously, and we have to be honest with people about what the effects of air pollution are on people, and why we not just should have no choice but to tackle it, but we should want to tackle it with every fibre of our being. So I'm fully accept this report and support completely the recommendations.
Councillor Lynn Stagg.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt. I agree with everything that's been said. Thank you, Richard. I have to admit I have not read every word of it. All right, I was still reading it at 11:20 last night, but by that stage I had sort of reached the end. But from what I've read, absolutely great. Thank you. I have been told, and I haven't checked this out, that between 2007 and 2017, car ownership in this city increased from 107,000 to 127,000, and an update on that is by the end of 2018 there were 128,500 cars registered in Portsmouth. Now, I'm not a mathematician, but I think I've worked it out roughly. That's about a 20% increase in 10 years or 11 years. It works out, again, I haven't checked this out, that about 1.37 cars per family. That's not sustainable. You know, not in any city, but in a city like Portsmouth, which is so small, you just can't do it. We've got to get the message out to the general public. It's not just we who've got to do things, and we have got to, but the general public have got to do things as well. You know, at one of my decision meetings, there was a lady came to object to residents' parking zone going in, and she said, I have 3 cars, what am I supposed to do? I mean, I didn't say get rid of 2 of them, at least, but I did explain to her that we haven't yet got elastic roads, and therefore, you know, I couldn't do much about it. But that message has got to get across to people that we can't really have 3-4 cars per family. Although the low-income areas don't generate as much air pollution, they actually have the oldest cars because they're the cheapest and they're the ones that are the most polluting. So we have a real dilemma, because if we want to get people to get rid of their polluting vehicles, they can't afford to replace them with newer, with lower emission vehicles. So, you know, it's a real catch-22 situation, and I don't know what the answer is to that. I think we've tried to see if we can get some extra funding for you know, cashing in your old cars, but I don't think that the reply from Michael Gove was I don't think it was positive or negative, it just wasn't, you know, so that's where we stand on that. We've also got to look, I think, outside of what we can do in Portsmouth. Planning laws, for example, are a nightmare because they will not take into consideration the cumulative impact of additional housing on the traffic in infrastructure, the transport infrastructure that we've got. So, for example, lots of planning applications go in dribs and drabs. So the whole scene is not, I mean, it's like St James's. If that was all done at one go, you'd have a humongous problem on the roads. And that is something we have to get central government to address, and we've got to put pressure on them to actually to do that. And lastly, if we get people out of cars, we've got to have an alternative form of transport, not just cycles. I mean, I'm past the age of cycling. I have a bike, but I don't use it because I've got rubbish knees. So we have the lowest take-up of bus transport in the whole of urban southeast England, with an average of 51 journeys per year in Portsmouth, 86 in Southampton. You can tell I've said this many times. 127, I think, in Reading and 189 in Brighton. We've got to improve the provision, and we're in a catch-22 situation again there because we've got private companies, and understandably, if people are not using the buses, they can't afford to run them. They're there to run them at a profit. They're not a charity. So I'm trying to work with the bus companies. I don't know how far I'll get, but I think there are lots of things we can do, not just, you know, we're looking at these figures and there's lots of things that we can do as a council, but I think there are outside bodies as well that we need to get involved.
Thank you then, Councillor Rob Wood.
I've got to say, Richard, I can see from the document and the amount of work that's gone in, I really want to pass on my thanks to yourself and your officers. You've obviously worked very hard. It's the first time I've seen Mike, when he normally analyses, he comes out with quite a lot of things that, you know, could be done, and to be fair, Mike's picked out some points, but it's quite even serious. And I thank Mike because he's made some relevant points also, which is what we've started to discuss. We've discussed about the inequalities, so between us as Cabinet members we've tried to think about how we can address those inequalities. But what I like is the last sentence, following on what from Lynn has said, because we also need to think about this differently, about what our ambitions are in the city, because it is an opportunity, as here. A developed country is not a place where the poor have cars, it's where the rich use public transportation. And it's that sort of thinking that we actually need to do, because that will serve all the purpose in terms of the inequalities of people who don't necessarily have a lot of cars, and they're not necessarily going to get the funding to improve their cars. The alternative is to have a very good public transport which not only serves the people who don't have that access to cars, but also make sure people who do have access for cars and are using them, if you ask them why they don't use it, they'll tell you because they need to have a very comprehensive transport network that they can rely on. And I think that's the important thing, which is it is an opportunity. The stars are sometimes aligned, and I think in this case about the environment, we already know that we're going to have to do quite a lot in the city. The stars are aligned, so we might as well take that opportunity. So thank you both very well.
Councillor Lee Hunt.
Yeah, thank you. So my concern, having spoken to the officers, and we've been debating this within the Cabinet for a long time, is we've touched on the periphery, is those people in this city who are self-employed, the so-called white van man or white van women, who many of them, I think you told us, had up to 40% coming to the city were non-compliant, the vans. When we looked at it, you gave us a statistic fairly recently. A great many people have their small businesses in this city. The city is built on small businesses, it's not built on huge businesses. A lot of these people have got non-compliant vehicles. So if the government imposes on this city a controlled air zone, and I understand the reasoning because we don't want to be poisoned by nitrous oxide or any kind of pollutants at all, and I want that to stop. But there seems to be so far nothing that I can comprehend, any assistance whatsoever for all those people, thousands of them in this city, who are going to have to change their vehicles. We're going to have to try and sell their vans right now, because by 2019, when we have to be, no, not 29, when do we have to be compliant again?
2021. The middle of 2021.
By that time, they're going to have to swap their vehicles, which they carry their tools in, their plumbing kits, all the electricity tools, all the wood, all the plasterers, all these people who go around and keep our business, our city built and moving and changing and regenerating and evolving, are suddenly going to get whacked. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't just lay my hands on £30,000 to buy a new car. So God knows how ordinary people in this city, and we're not one of the richest cities in the country, so we need help from the government. And so far, I think we've been stonewalled by Mr. Gove and the Conservative government. They want these changes, they want to effect these changes. We want to effect these changes for all the right reasons, but there's going to be a lot of people out there, families, small businesses and so on, who are going to be charged. They're going to be the ones bearing the cost because of failure of public policy from successive governments over many years for failing to deal with this issue. And it includes the amount of houses that we're having to build in the city that someone touched on just now. We've been building houses in places we know have been highly polluted for a very long time. When I've been on the planning committee, and Tristan's gone, I wanted to ask him about that, but somebody touched on it just now. But my concern is those people in Charles Dickens Ward, in Fratton Ward, in fact all over the city, in Nelson Ward, everywhere, across the city, who just about manage, who just about do a good business, yet they're going to get whacked now. They're going to have to change their vans, and they're going to have to find a lot of money, which they're probably not going to be able to find, and they write it all off against tax for new vehicles. And that's what we're facing. It's going to happen. I know it's going to happen, but our people, the people that we represent in this city, should be getting help from the government. And I hope that this money comes, but I also hope that they're going to get help changing their vehicles. I think that's really important. I think we have to push for that.
Thank you, Lee. Anyone else? Derek, Dave?
Just a quick one. Sorry to keep it going, but it is an important issue. I just want to follow on from what Lee said. Councillor Hunter said. With the clean air zone, yes, we do have to be minded that there are people on low incomes who rely on car or vans to transport to get to work, and we are minded of that. But the way we need to look at it is not let's wait for a clean air zone to try and get compliance, is to achieve compliance before we even have to think about a clean air zone in the shortest time possible. So we should be doing all we can to promote things like cycling, improving the walking infrastructure in the city and the public transport, all of which are made difficult by the fact we're not allowed to own our own public transport through government rulings. But yeah, we need to do as much as we can as a council to try and mitigate it before it gets there, so we can be as compliant as possible, not just because of a deadline, but because that's what we should be naturally doing as a council every single year. And also, Am I allowed to ask Mike a question? Sorry, if he's allowed.
As a cabinet member, you are allowed to ask Mike a question, Dave. Yeah.
Thank you, because you mentioned about the different documents related. Was it to the City Link proposed road? We were using the different models.
That's correct.
And you haven't got an answer on that. Is it all right if we can put forward something to make sure we get an answer to that? So if someone can...
That, I believe, will be part of the things that Joe will put out from the minutes and pass back to you, Dave, so that you can get
So it will definitely come down, and can I just, in a public forum, that will definitely come to me about what you've said about that.
And what might help is I'm very happy to email copies of my deputation and the handouts and amplify on any of the other questions to Joanne and to councillors.
Yeah,
that would be very helpful, Mike. Thank
you.
To
all of us, yeah.
To make sure that we get the dots joined up around this, because as you say, having different reporting measures is rather pointless.
Yeah, and I think as we should all, as cabinet members on our different portfolios, we should all, in this climate emergency, we should all be looking at it through an environmental lens. Yeah. So thank you.
Okay, Darren, you wanted to follow up?
No.
Are you sure? You indicated?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. One comment that I wanted to add is I'm absolutely sick to death of the government ignoring the unique geography of this city. We are an island, we've got 3 roads on and off, and we can't just put diversions in place to stay away from the difficult bits. And they ignore us on housing targets, so enforcing us to go up and up and up, which changes the way people live. It's the same with the air quality issue, is that the measures that we're actually able to put in place without penalising people on low incomes and taking draconian measures are so much harder in a city that is surrounded by water. And sooner or later, somebody up in Westminster is going to have to acknowledge that setting targets that treat Portsmouth in the same way as every other city in this country are an absolute nonsense. And if they just put that to one side and work with us to come to reasonable targets and offered proper support to enable this city to move forward over some of these major humps, we might actually get somewhere. So I'm well aware that Michael Gove is doing other things other than watching the live stream today, but if somebody would like to send him a copy of it and tell him to get his head out of his bottom and start listening to Portsmouth, yes, Neil, you can put that in the paper. Thank you very much. Anyone else on this before we move to either accept or not accept the recommendations? Okay, so the proposals before us from Richard are that we are recommended to approve the submission of the 2019 ASR as attached as Appendix 1 to DEFRA, publication of the documents set out in Appendix 9, Section 9.4, albeit that they already are, and I'd like to add a recommendation, if that's all right, that the relevant lead officers and the cabinet members are given a copy of Mr Dobson's deputation today and asked to report back with relevant adjustments that need to be made to bring all our various measurement streams in line so that we have one coherent message. Would cabinet members be happy with that? So thank you, Mike. Chris?
I'm just conscious, I mean, I may have partial information here, but I'm just conscious that particularly for what we used to call the city centre road or city link, we are required to use a particular type of model for the bid to government for the funding. So, and that model might be different from what we use for our own planning purposes.
So would you be saying, Chris, that there is inconsistency in the advice that we get from government on different work streams?
It may be that the proposal that you just made might not be able to put into effect.
So could I amend that recommendation to say that where there are inconsistencies in the way that government require us to assess different elements of this, we point out in any reports or decisions that those inconsistencies are from HM government? Is everyone happy with that? Definitely. Excellent. Thank you, Chris. That was very helpful. So thanks very much to Richard and the team. I know you put a huge amount of work into this, and there's been time pressures as well, so thank you very much. Hayley, did you want to add anything from your end of things?
Yeah, I might just say a bit about the low-income groups, if I could.
That would be very helpful.
Let you know how we're trying to address that. So As Richard talked about, we have to submit our local air quality plan to government by the 31st of October this year. It all has to be evidence-based, and you'll have seen that one of the things we're doing at the moment is a survey to ask people about how they would respond to different levels of clean air charge. And in that, it asks people about their income, and it also asks them for suggestions about what kind of measures would help you to cope with the daily charge. So from that collection of evidence, we should hopefully be able to come up with some measures to help people in the city. So it's this important thing about it has to be evidence-based, so we've had to put that survey out to kind of get the evidence back, and from that we can then go and really ask for government for the things we need, because at the moment we're asking for things but we haven't really got anything to support it. So until we get the results of the survey, that will really help us to inform what we're asking for.
That's online.
Yes.
Go on then, Dave.
Sorry. And can we just confirm that this is the initial consultation for drivers? There will be a wider one to the wider audience later.
Yes, that's right. So this, like I said, this is just an initial survey to inform the evidence base. If we are required by government to implement a clean air zone, there will be a formal statutory consultation for 12 weeks towards the end of this year.
Thanks, and good point there, Dave, because I know there's been some frustration from some people who don't own cars, saying that they should have the right to tell car owners how much they should have to pay, but the point is this is about changing behaviours, that's the whole thing, and that's not going to change the behaviour of a car owner. We want to know what's going to change it for the car owner themselves, not what the pedestrian's view is. So,
Sorry, it isn't just about cars, it's about vans as well. And vans are a very important part of our motorised vehicles. And, you know, I made my point earlier on, but these people who are self-employed and have got to change their vans, perhaps, depending on what happens, they're going to be whacked really hard.
there is a separate consultation for van owners and other business owners, etc. So people who operate commercial vehicles, there's a separate consultation to the ones who own domestic ones.
So there's a separate one for LGVs, so vans, HGVs, lorries, and there's also a taxi and hackney carriage one as well.
And that's important because it will give us that data that you're worried about, Lee, very specifically, rather than it being grouped in with everything else. So, okay, so thank you very much. I know you both work on this together, so a huge amount of effort's going into it. So thank you very much, and we'll look forward to seeing the results of the consultation when they come back. Cabinet have indicated that they're happy with the recommendations in front of us, so they are duly accepted. Joe, thanks to everybody for their contributions today, including Mike, and that concludes today's meeting.